Alright everybody, today we're going to be looking at some people's hot takes for the Legend of Zelda series under this thread. There are over 300 responses, so we're not going to get to everything, but I thought it would be fun to look over a few people's hot takes, see if they're a little bit reasonable or completely unreasonable. Of course, opinions based, yada yada. Let's get into the thread. First guy over here says, Tears of the Kingdom is an awful game and an even worse sequel. Okay, listen, Tears of the Kingdom is not the best game in the world. It's not even really the best Zelda game, but to call it awful and a terrible sequel is a little bit of an exaggeration. At least on the sequel thing, I can kind of understand it. If you like Breath of the Wild more, that makes sense. It had better exploration, a more new world, and it came out 7 years ago, which made it a lot more impressive. But as a game on its own, I don't think you could call it awful at all. The most important thing about a game is whether or not it's fun, and Tears of the Kingdom is fun. If you think about the perspective of somebody who doesn't really play games all the time, just wants to sit back, relax, and play something enjoyable, you think they aren't going to enjoy Tears of the Kingdom at least a little bit? You don't have to love Tears of the Kingdom. I mean, even myself, I've become a lot more harsh on it recently, but come on. It's not the worst game out there. This next guy says, Tears of the Kingdom is a bad game, genuinely for its bad game design and mechanics. Okay, well, we kind of just went over this one, so let's move on. Twilight Princess is super overrated and felt old since release. Why? It could have kept the realistic brown and vomit green colors, it could have kept the obnoxious backtracking and linearity, it could have even kept the closed down Hyrule field instead of being open like Ocarina of Time, but there's no excuse for that clunky control. Yes, it works, but there's no excuse for Twilight Princess Link controlling similarly to Ocarina of Time 7 years prior, especially since having Wind Waker with much better controls having been made a precedent. There are some fair criticisms for Twilight Princess. I personally criticized how I thought the game was a little bit too long and had a lot of padding, but to say it's really bad because of the controls? I feel like he could have picked a better reason than that. The Zelda series is not for controls. It's for a lot of things. It's for music, it's for dungeons, it's for puzzles, it's for exploration. The last thing I think of when I think of the Zelda series is having good or smooth controls. I mean, there is some truth to this hot take. I do think Wind Waker, Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild, even Skyward Sword had more smooth controls than Twilight Princess, but not by much. I don't think it's really a big deal. Let's move on. If you think Tears of the Kingdom is boring or copy-pasted, then you lack imagination and are not the target audience for that game. It's fine if you aren't, but there's a reason that the Switch games are the best-selling Zelda games of all time. They are very fun to a vast majority of people. I don't really have that much to say about this hot take because for the first time ever, I kind of agree. I mean, I think that there are some fair criticisms for the game and a lot of them are brought up, but I think it's true that a lot of the people criticizing the game are just bringing up unfair reasons. If the game's not for you, that's fine, the game's not for you. But this person is completely right. There's a reason the vast majority of people prefer Tears of the Kingdom to the old Zelda games. It's just a more marketable product. It appeals to more people. Doesn't mean it's better, but it does mean that it's probably not terrible. This next person over here has around 10 hot takes, and I was thinking about just skipping over them, but instead we're going to go over a rapid fire. So 3, 2, 1. 1. Goat is the most overrated Zelda boss of all time. Nope, disagree. I thought Goat was pretty fun. 2. Arbiter's Grounds is the most overrated and undercooked Twilight Princess dungeon. Kinda true, it is pretty overrated, but to be fair, it's like the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time, just a little bit worse. 3. A Link to the Past dungeon design is very dated and obsolete compared to its successors. Okay, listen, A Link to the Past is not the best Zelda game, it doesn't have the best puzzles or dungeons, but to call them obsolete and dated, kinda gotta disagree. I thought they were pretty fun. 4. Tears of the Kingdom's dungeons and story is severely underrated and underappreciated. I kind of agree. I liked a couple of the dungeons, I thought some of the puzzles were pretty good, and the story really wasn't that bad, at least to me. 5. The Wind Waker has a better combat system than Twilight Princess. I don't know how you could possibly think this, because Twilight Princess has more varied combat, better moves, more enemies to fight. I don't really know what can make Twilight Princess worse when it comes to combat, but okay. 6. Ocarina of Time's Water Temple was never hard nor tedious. People just suck at 3D Zelda puzzles. You might be the best video game player ever, but I think there's a reason that most people sucked at the Water Temple and loved all the rest of the dungeons. 7. Modern Zelda and traditional Zelda beneath the surface are much more alike than old fans give credit for. I kind of agree. I mean, they're definitely different genres and very different games, but they are a little bit similar in many ways, so that's true. 8. Most old fans' obsession with traditional Zelda is really about nostalgia rather than functionality. Echoes of Wisdom solidifies that more to me. Kind of true, but I don't think that's really that true actually now that I think about it. Listen, Ocarina Ocarina of Time to this day is still the best Zelda game. It's better than Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, or any of the games that came before it, so the people saying that Ocarina of Time is great, for example, aren't nostalgic, they're just right. It's a great game, and the best in the series. Quick fire over. Let's move on. My hot take is that Twilight Princess is kind of boring. It's the only mainline Zelda game I gave up and couldn't complete. Twilight Princess is one of my favorite Zelda games. It's probably one of my favorite games out there, but I do definitely see why somebody could find it boring. I think there was a little bit of padding, whether it be through the Tears of Light sections in the middle of the game or near the end where you have to do this crazy tedious long side quest before the city in the sky. So even though it's one of my favorite Zelda games, I can see why it could get kind of boring. Fair enough. Carry Accomplished 777 says the Zelda series died 2017. Uh-oh, looks like somebody here is a little bit old. Can we get Grandpa his rocking chair? Alright, but for real though, the Zelda series didn't really die in 2017. It definitely changed to appeal to a broader audience, but the Zelda series has always been changing and shifting. If you compare Zelda 1 to Ocarina of Time, yeah, they're gonna have similarities, but if you actually look at the gameplay, Zelda 1's way more open and Ocarina of Time is way more closed. And if you look at the difference between Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild is way more open and Twilight Princess is more closed. The series has always been evolving and changing, and I think that for the most part that's a good thing. There are definitely some things that Breath of the Wild got wrong that the old Zelda games got right, but the series definitely didn't die. Breath of the Wild's dungeons are the best in the series. Everybody talks about Ancient Cistern and the Sand Ship, but all the Breath of the Wild dungeons are one big puzzle box to which you manipulate. They are short and maybe the theming could be better, but I love them. I love the lead up to entering those giant mechs. I love all of the champions' moments after you beat them. The Ganonlings may look samey, but they are all mechanically distinct. Hey, I love Breath of the Wild. Everybody loves Breath of the Wild, but the dungeons, absolutely not. The dungeons were definitely not the best. The problem with Breath of the Wild's dungeons is really that they're all just so samey. Va Naboris is way too similar to Va Meadow. Va Meadow is way too similar to Va Ruta. You get the point. Individually, the dungeons aren't the best either, but they definitely aren't terrible. I enjoyed some of the puzzles, especially in Va Ruta and Meadow, but I just can't get behind the idea that they were really exceptional. On their own, every dungeon in Breath of the Wild might be like a 6 or a 7 out of 10, but when you take them all together in this big package and they're all so long, they do kinda suck. Ocarina of Time is great, but the games that have come out since have only improved on what Ocarina of Time has introduced. At this point, Ocarina of Time wouldn't be anywhere near my top 5, and I think 80 to 90% of the love it gets is just nostalgia. A lot of the love these old Zelda games get, like Ocarina of Time, is definitely nostalgia, but that's definitely not what most of it is. Look at me, for example. I played Ocarina of Time for the first time like 1 or 2 years ago, and it ended up being one of my favorite games. I have no nostalgia for Ocarina of Time. I had no incentive to love the game as much as I did. I just played through the experience and loved it more than any other Zelda game I've played to this day. There are definitely some quality of life things the future games got better, like improved fast travel, better frame rate, better graphics, you know, the basic stuff that comes with better hardware, but the game itself, the magic of Ocarina of Time, I feel like has never really been topped in the series. The characters are just so memorable, the soundtrack is so unique, the world is so magical and fairy tale-esque, it's really just impossible to describe why Ocarina of Time is so good, and you'll only understand if you play it. Majora's Mask is objectively the worst Zelda game, and that is not just my opinion. A lot of people I know who have played it and many other Zelda games relay the exact same complaint. The turning back the clock mechanic is a major drawback to the game. I'm not the biggest Majora's Mask fan, obviously. I've actually gotten a lot of criticism because I didn't like the game that much, but I thought one of the best things about the game was the turning back the clock mechanic. I get it's a little bit stressful and everything, but that's kind of what makes the game feel unique. It's like you're always in a race to beat the game or see if you lose, and that's what makes it so interesting. The 3-day cycle is also a really good way for the game to make every day feel unique, because every character has a unique schedule, every day is different, and because of that, the characters feel so much more alive than they do in the other games. I'm not the Majora's Mask shill or anything. I'm not here to sell you a Majora's Mask hat or something, so I'm not really interested in defending the game that much, but I'm just gonna say, it's not objectively the worst Zelda game. Not sure if this is a hot take, but it would have been much more impactful if Zelda ended up staying as a dragon. The cutscene stresses the impact and permanence of turning into one and how irreversible it supposedly is, so I rolled my eyes when she was turned back at the end. It would have made her sacrifice feel more impactful and important, but it felt as if she was turned back for the sake of the timeline and to potentially bring her back for a third game. I think this would have made sense if Tears of the Kingdom was a remarkably dark story, or if they were really focused on the stakes or something, something, but Tears of the Kingdom is really a game that's made for kids, or at least a younger demographic, okay? It's a Nintendo game. They're not gonna basically kill off Zelda and turn her into a dragon and then never bring her back. This person says, and to potentially bring her back for a third game, but I feel like it's kind of the opposite. I think if they wanted a third game in this Zelda world, they definitely would have kept Zelda as a dragon so that the next game could be Zelda, the Dragon Awakens, or something stupid like that, where you have to go on a quest to bring her back. Whether Zelda should have turned into a dragon or not is up to your interpretation, but I thought the ending to Tears of the Kingdom was pretty remarkable regardless. Bainy Thanos says, Tears of the Kingdom makes Breath of the Wild obsolete, and okay, we can love Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. I don't think we really have to compare them all the time, but let's just talk about this for a second. Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are both amazing games, and I do think that Tears of the Kingdom is the superior game in general, but I will say I don't think it makes Breath of the Wild obsolete. If you're gonna play Tears of the Kingdom, I think it's a much better experience after you've played Breath of the Wild a year or two before. Getting to see the world for the first time, all of the characters, experiencing everything that this place has to offer, that's really the experience you're gonna get in Breath of the Wild. Tears of the Kingdom isn't really about that in the same way. In Breath of the Wild, you get to experience and explore this beautiful world, and in Tears of the Kingdom, you get to see how it's changed. I think it's a great combination, and you can't really get one without the other. Lore theorizing is supposed to be just for fun and shouldn't be taken too seriously. Yep. I agree. Don't tell that to the 5-hour-long video essays about Colin's boots or whatever is the next topic, but yeah, the lore in the Zelda series really shouldn't be taken that seriously. Skyward Sword is the best and most enjoyable by a lot, and Breath of the Wild is overrated. Basically, it is just grinding and leveling up to do one specific task, also weak storytelling. Hey, you had me at Skyward Sword. I'm not really gonna go over the Breath of the Wild thing. I'm more interested in this Skyward Sword is the best and most enjoyable by a lot comment because I actually can kinda get behind this. I still prefer Ocarina of Time. I might even prefer Tears of the Kingdom or Twilight Princess, I don't know. But Skyward Sword is super enjoyable. Definitely one of the best games in the series. The side quests are pretty good. The world is super fun to explore. The dungeons are straight up the best in the entire series. The items are amazing. I don't have to say this because a couple weeks ago I made a video basically glazing Skyward Sword, so go check that out if you want to see me talk about it more, but yeah, I kind of agree with this take. I think it's totally fair. Tingle isn't a perfect 10 out of 10 in the looks department. He's a modest 9.9 out of 10, and that's okay. Listen, Tingle Believer, wait, his name is Tingle Believer. Okay, well, I don't know how controversial this take is, but I think Minish Cap is just fine. It's as bare bones 2D Zelda as you can get. I've seen a good amount of love for it recently, but I just don't get what's so special about it. Nothing from the game really sticks out in my mind. Also, the dungeons are way too long, especially the Wind Temple. I completely agree. I actually really enjoyed the Minish Cap, but when it comes to 2D Zelda and Zelda in general, it is just the most bare bones, standard stuff you can get. It's kind of like an AI developed a Zelda game. The music is pretty much all just remixes of old Zelda songs. The graphics are great, but kind of just look like an improved version of the A Link to the Past graphics. And the dungeons definitely weren't the best. This person is totally correct with the Wind Temple being way too long. I almost just straight up quit the game at that one dungeon, so even though I liked most of the game, areas like that definitely dragged it down a bit more for me. Minish Cap is definitely a good game on its own, but when it comes to its place in the series, it's definitely one of the most bare bones out there. Totally true. I like Zelda 2 much more than A Link to the Past. A Link to the Past does nothing for me that I can't get out of different Zeldas, but implemented better. Okay, well, I kind of get what he's saying, because it is true, A Link to the Past is like a worse version of Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess in a way, but as a game on its own, I think A Link to the Past is just straight up so much more fun than Zelda 2, and I don't hate Zelda 2, I think Zelda 2 is fine, but A Link to the Past is still really fun to go back to today, whereas Zelda 2 is obviously dated, you might need a mod or two to make it more fun, save states are a must, and even with all that stuff, it's not going to be the most fun game out there. I definitely respect loving Zelda 2 because it's a rough hill to die on, man. People really hate that game, but yeah, I mean, they hate it for a reason. Last but not least, we're going to be going over this hot take, which says Wind Waker is a great game with an unappealing art style, which is interesting because I feel like it's the other way around. Wind Waker is an okay game with a fantastic art style, and I feel like that's the biggest reason people love it in the first place. Wind Waker does not have an exceptional story, the music is not as good as some of the other 3D games, the dungeons aren't the best, but you know what is great about Wind Waker? the art style, the presentation, the way it looks. That's really what makes Wind Waker stand out to so many people, including myself. I mean, people have said I hate Wind Waker. I don't hate Wind Waker. I think it looks fantastic. It's up there with A Link to the Past, the Minish Cap, probably another Zelda game that looks good. I can't think of it right now. The Wind Waker is a fantastic looking game. I think if you don't like Wind Waker HD, that's kind of fair because it's definitely oversaturated, but the original game on the GameCube is just so impressive for the hardware they had at the time. Alright everybody, that about wraps it up for us today. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to see more content. Make sure to click this video wherever it is on the screen that I decided to put it on after, and yeah, I'll see you later. Bye bye.